Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Everyone, we're so grateful you're with us today. Have you ever heard of the word entropy? And maybe some of you have, maybe some of you are scientific and you've heard of this word, but we want to talk about this concept of entropy and how it affects marriages. Now, here's a definition. Entropy is the tendency of a physical system to lose energy and coherence over time, such as a gas that expands and then dissipates until there's no trace of it left. The way that I think about it is entropy is kind of like the erosion of a system. It's the wearing away of a system. And so now think about how that concept would apply to marriages. In fact, the great scholar, marriage scholar Bill Doherty, talks about couples that are entropic, or in other words, they have this entropy concept in their marriage where it's eroding away. There's this gradual sense of loss over time. Couples are drifting apart. And so one of the things we want to talk about today, after we kind of describe this entropy, is how to be entropy resistant. Or in other words, put it in other terms, maybe we say, how do we combat apathy in a marriage relationship?
And I know we've all heard the word apathy, but I just wanted to define it a little bit, just so that we all are kind of on the same page. But apathy is a state of indifference or lack of interest or emotion or concern about something, especially since today we're talking about marriage. So it'd kind of be the lack of concern or purpose-driven behavior or even goal-directed behavior in our marriage, right? So it's just kind of like, just let it kind of do its thing. Years ago, Harold B. Lee kind of used this quote, which I thought was really awesome. And it says, someone has said that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. And he said, I say to you, brother, and the most dangerous thing that can happen between you and your wife or between me and my wife is apathy, not hate. But for them to feel that we are not interested in their affairs, that we are not expressing our love and showing our affection in countless ways. Women, to be happy, have to be loved, and so do men, he said.
Yeah, I think we take each other for granted, right? It's so easy to do that. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but I think that is one of the, biggest, greatest challenges for couples that are over busy and over programmed.
In this day and age, I
right.
think.
With so many things going on, right, is that sometimes the marriage relationship is what kind of falls behind or takes, second or third or fourth place.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we all start out like so in love, so excited, can't wait. I mean, we wouldn't get married, right, if we weren't.
You would never marry that person, right, in the first place if they were just dull and boring and not interested in you or didn't have time for you, right?
Right, but now that we are married, we have children, we have careers, we have hobbies, the world creeps in, and all of a sudden our marriages are on the back burner and everything else comes before our marriages. Because I know with us too, I think we take each other for granted because we're like, oh, they get it. They know how busy I am. We got it. They'll be there for me no matter what. We totally trust each other. And so everything takes precedence. Everything comes before. But then after a while, you start realizing, wow, do I even know them? Have we even checked in lately? Have we communicated? I feel like sometimes we just are like handing the baton off to each other, right? Or saying high five as we go to bed at night. It's a crazy life that we all lead. And so we really need to, we just thought this was a really appropriate topic because we hear this a lot and we're seeing this a lot, especially as we're becoming empty nesters and our children are leaving.
Yeah.
That we are kind of left with just us and we're just like, okay, where are we? What are we?
What's our identity?
Yeah.
Janie, one of the things I remember is that we had young kids. Maybe our oldest was 12 or 10. I was in, that doctoral program in graduate school, and we had several talks, I'm putting that in quotes, over the years while that was going on, because our life went from a pretty normal life, where we were involved with our kids, coaching their teams, being involved in their activities, having a lot of family time, to now I was gone. I was gone a lot, and I had to take on a second job just so we could financially survive. And it was just, and we bought this house that we were remodeling. So anytime there was any extra money or time, we were doing that. And anyway, my point is, I was asked to speak on marriage relationships in some, young married stake or something. And I was giving my talk, and you were there, you came. And so afterwards, as I always do, I always want to know what you thought about what I said. And I remember saying, okay, what'd you think? As we were driving home, and you go, well, all I could think of is, as you were up there standing up talking, is, do I even know who this is? Because the point was, we hadn't really seen each other in a really strong way for quite a while. I mean, it had been a grind, and here you were saying, do I even know you? And I was like, well, wait, here I am doing a doctorate degree in marriage and family relationships, and completely failing at home, right, with my marriage. But yeah, it's true. I mean, and these are the type of conversations I think most couples are going to have periodically to say, hey, wait, are we on course or what? This is President Nelson. He said that too many couples fall short of their potential and they let their romance become rusty. They take each other for granted and allow other interests or clouds of neglect to obscure the vision of what their marriage really could be. And he says marriages would be a lot happier if they were nurtured more carefully. Another way to say that is to build on Bill Dotery. Now, Bill Dotery is a wonderful marriage and family scholar out of the University of Minnesota who's written so many great books and articles on marriage and the family. But one of the things that he said in his book, Take Your Marriage Back, was that we just get used to each other, right? We just get so used to each other. And how about this? He says, familiarity breeds not contempt, but taking each other for granted. And then all relationships lose some degree of newness and freshness over time if we don't work to put those ingredients back in. And so there's that idea of entropy, the erosion of the relationship, over time.
Could be just feeling like roommates, maybe. We pass by, we share a home, we swap schedules really quick, we take care of the details, but, it's just kind of like a roommate relationship. It could be over time.
And I think you're right, Janie. It's, for a lot of couples, probably like us, it's like, okay, I know Janie's going to be fine. I know she's doing great, and she knows how busy I am with this, and she totally gets it. But then that gets old after a while, right? When all of a sudden you haven't really connected in a long time.
Like we were just talking about, Spencer W. Kimball years ago said there are many people who do not find divorce attorneys and don't end their marriages, but who have permitted their marriages to grow stale and weak and cheap. There are spouses who are in the low state of mere joint occupancy of the home. Again, that kind of roommate.
Just roommates living together, yeah.
These people will do well to reevaluate, to renew their courting, to express their affection, to acknowledge kindness, and to increase their consideration so their marriages, again, can become beautiful, sweet, and glowing. And I like how he warned people jokingly. He said, don't let your marriages become stale and your love grow cold like old bread, worn out jokes, and cold gravy.
Right.
I can't think of anything worse than cold gravy, right?
We could make a list of all the things that are on our schedule, that take so much of our time. I mean, just having children and all the activities that they're involved in, their lessons, their special, individual, private lessons for things. Their schoolwork, academics, our professions, the work that we do. People are working longer hours than they ever have before. You would think the opposite is true, but no. And so many of us now are bringing work home. I just think, Janie, and you see me all the time, but it's like this email battle that I feel like I'm always facing or texting because I don't want to go to bed with 500, of those emails or text messages the next morning. So I'm trying to fight them off during the day, and I know that takes away. We have extended families that we try to spend time with. We have
hobbies, recreations, friends, family.
Social life, yeah.
And all these things, just the mundane things of life, right? That just take so much attention and require so much. And all these put together, and there's probably a million more. And then we as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we all have church callings, which involve hours during the week or on Sundays, or we're preparing for
lessons
on Sunday, and we have meetings, and it really is a crisis of busyness, I think, that we all live in right now. There is so much on our plate, so much coming at us like a fire hose. I really do think that in a lot of circumstances, our marriages do get pushed to the back burner for sure.
Yeah, I believe it. I think we've kind of created a monster. Technology is so great for us in so many ways, and this is just one example, but also it's created a monster for us that we have to deal with all the time now. I mean, you can't even go on vacation. Janie, you know how this is. We've talked about it many times, but there's just always an urgent need coming across email or text that we have to deal with while we're trying to get away from everything, So let's talk about some research here just for a minute and a couple other things regarding what scholars are saying to us about this idea of time, the time crunch. Research tells us that the longer people are married, the less time they spend together.
Wait, say that again?
The longer people are married, the less time they actually... In other words, you spend more time together as newlyweds than you probably do as a 50 or 60-year-old couple, right?
Wow.
Yet the amount of time that couples spend together in face-to-face interaction is crucial to marital happiness and marital satisfaction. And so Michelle Weiner Davis, who I think is one of the great scholars in our country on marriage, wrote a book called Divorce Busting years ago. She said that the most significant contributor to the breakdown of marriage today is the lack of time together.
We heard a quote once, Mark, that said being hyper busy is the new status symbol.
Yeah,
the social prizes no longer go to the wealthiest, but it's the busiest.
Right. Well, don't you love it when you talk to someone, how's it going? Oh, super busy. We tell them, we love to tell people how busy we are, right?
Right, and I feel
maybe that's not a good thing.
No, and I hear myself saying that all the time, but I'm like, but everyone's busy. Like, I don't have like some corner on that market of busy. Everyone's busy. We just live in the culture. It's our culture today. So here are a few statistics that we found that we thought were really interesting. In the National Survey of Marital Strengths, spending time together was identified as one of the top 10 strengths for happily married couples. So first one, we got to spend time together.
Right.
In addressing the statement, we have a good balance of leisure time spent together. 71% of happy couples agreed to that statement. Okay, so we've got to have leisure time. Conversely, only 28% of unhappy couples felt like they spent a healthy dose of leisure time together. In the same study, researchers identified the lack of time together as one of the top 10 stumbling blocks for married couples. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Over 80% of couples who are having struggles in their marriage identified the lack of time together as a significant problem. Finally, in measuring couple connection and closeness, 97% of happy couples reported that they enjoy spending free time together. 97%.
Pretty high percentage.
For couples who reported that they were unhappy in their marriage, only 43% reported that they enjoyed spending time together.
Right.
So there is a big correlation between having fun, spending quality time, and leisure time together.
Right. And once again, we researchers sometimes make a lot of money doing this research that we could all go, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? I don't think anyone's surprised that if you spend more time together, you'll be happier, right? Well, here's another piece of data that time-starved couples basically quit doing the very things that brought them together in the first place, right? You think about that. Janie, we can think about our relationship. We can think about anyone that we know. You spend so much time together early on, especially during engagement.
Courting and dating,
right,
and doing nice things for each other.
I mean, I remember when we were dating or even engaged, I look back and think, wait, did I ever work? Because I know I work. But literally, I remember...
We would do, make dinners together, do homework together. We didn't want to be apart.
Right.
And now I'm like, oh, did I see him yesterday?
Right. Well, I'm even thinking, though, that it almost changed the minute that we got married. Because the minute we got married, I had a job that I worked at night. Well, now I needed to work all day long, as well. And you had to go to work. And next thing you know, we're seeing each other in the evenings, if we're lucky, right? And it just happened so quickly. Once couples decrease the amount of time they spend together, then nurturing could be replaced with nagging, and praise could be replaced with pessimism, and then marriage just doesn't survive well when there's no nurturing. I mean, nurturing is one of the foundation pieces to a marriage, and if we're not being nourished, then the marriage is going to wither away and die, just like a lawn. If we quit watering our lawn or watering our garden and putting fertilizer on it and weeding and sunlight and all that stuff, it's going to wither away. Well, that's what's happening with our relationships when we're not devoting enough time and attention and nurturing to the relationship. Now, several years ago, I had the opportunity to write a chapter in a book called By Divine Design. In my chapter, the assignment of my chapter was healing the time-starved marriage, and we were able to collect some data and get some great statements from just, wonderful people in different parts of the country talking about how this time crunch that we're talking about, Janie, today kind of affects and has affected or impacted their marriage. Here's one I'll read. It says, after 46 years of marriage and raising 6 children, I think hyper busyness can rob couples of time together. You become like preschoolers who engage in parallel play, just going on your own personal treadmills, thinking you are doing the Lord's work, but much too busy to do the most effective work, which is the work on relationships, especially in your marriage. Talking, listening, pondering, and loving. And now I'm seeing the same busy patterns in my own married children's lives. We are just running too fast for our own good.
Very wise woman, huh?
Yeah.
Here's another one from that same study that you did, Mark. My husband thinks that one of the greatest challenges for active Latter-day Saint couples is to learn to grow together and not separately. When you and your husband are involved in children, church responsibilities, work, it seems that you are constantly going in opposite or different directions. Mm-hmm. How do you find the time to grow together? How do you make it so that when the children leave home, you and your spouse are not complete strangers? I know several couples who are not able to work through these challenges. Now, as older couples, their marriages are hollow and unfulfilling. They spend the majority of their time on everything else except their marriage.
So like we kind of talk about, we're talking about this idea of taking our marriage for granted, just always assuming it's just going to be there and it's going to be fine. But it's really not. It may not be, right? And so Les and Leslie Perrott, who are great Christian authors, who wrote a book that we would recommend to everyone. They said the book was called Your Time-Starved Marriage, How to Stay Connected. But they talked about what they call the pitfalls of busyness. And I just think this is wonderful for all of us to think about. They said, number one, the first pitfall of busyness is that busyness corrupts our conversations. They wrote, we recently received an email from our friend who told us that he and his wife, in managing their household of 3 children, feel more like air traffic controllers than husband and wife. He said they barely have enough time to talk because they spend so much time juggling schedules and taxiing kids to and fro. Their conversations consist primarily of sentences like next Tuesday is an early dismissal day for the kids, to something like, hey, one of us needs to be home to take this other kid to soccer practice. So busyness deludes us into thinking that we're conversing. We're actually just trying to make it through the hectic speed of our day.
And Mark, that makes me laugh because I feel like that was our life for 30 years.
Well, the sad thing is it feels like it's still
maybe we haven't even gotten past that.
We haven't graduated from that yet. But what it does, everyone, is it moves us from a spot where we can have deep conversations and connect emotionally to really what we're doing is just coordinating. Our conversations, some call it superficial conversation. I call it coordinating because it's me, Janie, calling you going, okay, now what time is that thing tonight? And what time do we have to
be there?
And, right? And so, so busyness definitely corrupts our conversations.
Okay, number 2 is that busyness depletes your love life.
Amen.
Devoting a little of yourself to everything, said Michael LaBeouf, means committing a great deal of yourself to nothing. It's true. When you're scattered too thin, when you're trying to stretch time beyond its limits, you end up with a zero balance in your love bank. The quality of your love life can't help but suffer when you are too busy. You're so busy running wild, doing everything you got to do in the day, that at night you're just exhausted.
I know, Janie, you and I have sat down on the bed at night together, and next thing you know, you wake up 2 hours later fully dressed in your whatever you were wearing that day because we just conked out while we were
Well, how many nights do I have to roll over and take your glasses off your face because you fell asleep with your glasses on?
Right. So once again, we know that's true, right? That busyness certainly can erode your love life. This next one is one of my favorites, but it's number 3. Busyness steals your fun. Busyness is a fun killer. There's just no way around it. If you're exhausted from just trying to keep the hamster wheel of life turning, then you're never going to enjoy the ride. Think of some of the crazy things. Danny, I often think of the crazy things or the fun things we've done in our life, done when we were younger, done as young couples. You think of those fun days, those fun dates, and the Perrott say that laughter was your third companion on every date. So what happened? You know what happened. Busyness pushed fun out of the commuter car. And Janie, one of the things I think about is, I'm just going to tell this story, but years ago, when we were at the Hill Cumorah pageant, late 1980s. I had just graduated from BYU. We were with your family, and we had a video camera. That was kind of a gift we gave to ourselves. And I and your brothers were just going around.
Back in the time when they were huge, they looked like the kind you carry on your shoulder, right?
Yeah, like the cameraman for Channel 5
News. You had to have a bag
News.
hanging off your... Yeah.
Right. But we had this camera, and we were just going around the Hill Cumorah and all the guests at the Hill Cumorah pageant, and we were just interviewing people and having fun and laughing hysterically, and it was so great. And we just made up all these inside jokes, and I remember just that was fun. Well, 10 years later, now maybe 15, we all have kids, we're in the thick of life, but we thought, hey, let's do that again. Let's try to do that same thing we did at the Hill Cumorah years ago here on Temple Square in Salt Lake. And we tried it for about 3 minutes and we just quit. And we looked at each other and said, we're not even funny anymore. None of us are funny. And we're like, I know, like we have bills to pay and braces to put on our kids.
We're chasing our kids around now.
Yeah, trying to keep our kids out of the fountain at Temple Square, and all of a sudden the fun is gone, right?
The next problem with busyness is that busyness erodes your soul. They talked about if you are busy enough for long enough, you'll become spiritually bankrupt, and God will feel absent to you in your marriage. Why? Because of the center of every couple's shared lives, underneath the layers of everydayness, and emptiness gradually settles in for even the most committed couples whose spirits have not been nourished. If you're so busy that you're not even taking time to even pray together or go to church together or whatever.
Or even have gospel discussions together.
Yeah, whatever your religiosity is in your home, that can literally erode your soul.
Well, Janie, I'm going to read the last part of this quote for a minute, where it says, busyness slowly and steadily wears away spiritual contentment and depletes our relationships of inspiration. Don't you feel that? It just, when we're so busy, it's like the life and the happiness and the joy of life is just sucked out of us. Our ability to think happy thoughts, our ability to feel, have these spiritual feelings and be led and receive inspiration just wears away because we're so busy.
And I know even for you and I, we try to have a weekly temple appointment, but it feels like lately, since school started this semester, we can't even go to the temple together. You're going one day, I'm going another day, you know what I mean? Because we can't even get our schedules to line up to go to the temple together. And that's just the life that we lead, in these crazy times. Yeah,
we're trying to balance. You try to balance everything, and I know that, even in my counseling practice, I've even noticed in my church life, is that often when couples get really busy, some of these spiritual practices are one of the first things that kind of go out the window. And when you quit praying together, and when you quit having gospel conversations together and studying together, and like you just said, attending the temple together, once again, now we've created this wedge between us and this distance. And now our relationship is eroding. We're back into that mode of, as we've talked about, entropy, right? Where the system is eroding away slowly. Janie, back to that study that I was referring to a little while ago, I'm going to quote a middle-aged father from Texas who wrote that there was a time in my marriage that I was traveling extensively, and I certainly wasn't paying attention to my wife or children. I was extra ornery and seemed to have a bad attitude about everything. And soon my attitude transferred over to my wife, and she began withdrawing from the relationship. Soon our marriage became stale and boring, and we knew that we had to do something about it.
I love these real life experiences from people, because I think we can all relate, right, to a certain extent. This one is from an LDS woman in Idaho, and she wrote, apathy is something that always needs to be kept in check. I feel that when I don't appreciate or recognize the little things that my husband does, I am letting apathy control the marriage. I need to spend more time looking for the good that he does and pointing it out to him than concentrating on what he's not doing.
So here's just a little thought. We're not trying to, throw an intervention in quite yet, but I think it ought to be mentioned, and it's from President Ezra Taft Benson. He was so good about talking about family relationships. He was speaking in a priesthood meeting, and he said to the men that nothing except God himself should take priority over your wife in your life. Not work, not recreation, not hobbies. And he was quoting a verse of scripture that said that we should cleave unto our wives. He says, what does that mean? It means stay close to her, be loyal and faithful to her, to communicate with her, and to express your love for her. If we start letting other things become more important than our relationship with our spouse, we're in trouble. We're back to this entropy, right? Where the relationship is just eroding away because it's not being nurtured.
And we've mentioned so many things that do erode our time, erode our marriage, and get in front of our spouse. But I don't think we talk enough. Well, I think we do talk enough, but I think we can't move on without mentioning media time.
Okay.
And that's a new thing that in our generation that we have to deal with.
This is not what our parents dealt with, right? This is not why they went to counseling.
I mean, on top of all the other busyness, we do spend a lot of time on media. And I think unchecked, we don't realize how much time that we are spending on our phones, on our TV, and in front of our screens or whatever. Just a recent study said the average American home TV set is on 7 hours a day. It just runs in the background. People didn't even realize it. One study documented that American men spend 15 hours a week watching TV, while women spend 17 hours a week in front of the television. Elder Oaks taught priorities should govern us in the precious time that we are given, and we should need to give that to our families. That's where the time should be spent.
It's actually interesting, we keep talking about some of this data. 75% of Americans use the internet and spend an average of 3 hours a day online. And that research is a little bit older now. I'm sure it's even more than that. One Nielsen survey said that men between the ages of 18 to 34, now think about this, men between the ages of 18 to 34 are the biggest consumers of video games, with over 48.2% of all American men using a video console every day for 2.5 hours a day. And by the way, the average gamer is about 32 years old. I say that because I think a lot of us think that when you think of video games, you think of teenage boys, but it's actually men.
Oh, yeah. This recent study that came out of Brigham Young University reported that 75% of gamers' spouses wish their spouse would put more time and effort into their marriage than into their game.
Yeah.
And that's sad. I just feel bad for women like that who are competing with video games for time with their husband.
I recently, Janie, had a couple that I saw in counseling. Unfortunately, they're divorced now, but a young married couple. And what was he doing every night? He was connecting on video games with his buddies across the country. How they kind of network and play these games together. And there was no time for his marriage because he was too busy running some planet on some virtual planet somewhere. But, once again, have to guard against that. Back to President Benson, what does he say? Nothing besides God comes before us in our relationship with our spouse.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I know some of us work in front of screens, we have to have screens these days. But the idle time that we spend scrolling, watching mundane things that all of a sudden you look up and it's an hour later, video games, all the things that are just time stealers. Elder Oak said it steals time away from relationships, family, and our loved ones, and especially our spouses.
I can't tell you how many times I've looked at young parents or even middle-aged parents and have watched their children trying to get their attention, and the parents are completely oblivious with that phone in their hand. And if you think you're not addicted or it's not a problem, just go without your phone for a day or a few hours, or in your mind think that you lost it. Because we've seen people that think they've lost their phone, and it's almost like worse than losing a kid, right? I mean, they are distraught.
Well, how many times too have we sat at a restaurant and watched like a married couple sit there and both of them on the phone the whole time, just on their, never saying a word to each other.
No conversation,
yeah. And just on their phones. And so we have real issues in this modern day culture. And that's one place we really need to fact check ourselves and make sure that we are not just killing time when we could be spending it with our spouse or children. Again, Mark, a quote from your study that you did several years ago. This is from a woman on the East Coast. She said, "I hate electronic media, all of it. I feel that so much time is wasted on unimportant facts and information. I will admit that when my husband gets a new computer, iPad, iPhone, or other gadget, I get jealous. I want his time and attention. The truth is that our family only has a few short hours a day together, so when my husband comes home, I do not like competing with media devices for his time. I want us focusing together on our family, cooking dinner together, eating together, doing homework, and cleaning up together, with both parents engaged." So wise. Then President Nelson said, "If marriage is a prime relationship in life, it deserves prime time." Very profound.
Yeah, so significant, so true. Another great distractor for married couples is kids, and we want to say that in the right way because we love our children and we want to be part of their lives. We want to have a close family, But frankly, once again, like I said, we've created a monster sometimes in how many activities that our children are involved in. Sometimes it can just be overwhelming, right? And I know, Janie, for us with 8 children, it wasn't uncommon for you to cover a couple of our kids' events one night, and I would go the other direction with a couple other ones, and we would meet in the middle somewhere. And I know a lot of families who do that right now. They're doing that at this point in their life, and it is hard, and you don't know what you would give up. I remember one time we had to have a hard conversation with one of our daughters who was an incredible dancer and gymnast, but she was gone every night of our life at that gym, and had competitions over weekends, and we realized one day, we're like, wait, she actually spends more time with her gymnastics coach than with us, and we're the parents, and
it really came to life one night. We were sitting around, I think it was a Sunday night, having dinner, and we were talking about an upcoming vacation we were going on, and she was like, wait, what? Where are we going? Like, she had never even got the memo that we were going on vacation because she was never home.
Yeah.
And at that point, we really had to reevaluate.
That's when we said, you know what? I think this is over. You're gonna do great. You're gonna be a great, you're gonna do great things in high school with these talents. But we want you back as our kid. And that was a real. I mean, I know that was hard for her too. But anyway, everything worked out. It was fine. But we had to reel that back in. And so, in a recent study, spouses with children at home reported spending nearly 2 hours less per day together than obviously those did without children at home. Once again, kind of an obvious study, right? But studies confirm that children have the first claim on their parents' non-working time. So free time isn't really spent between a husband and a wife when you have multiple children. Instead, children usually take that time. And once again, we love that, right? We want to have a close family. We want to have time with our children. But parents have to find a way to create time for themselves too. I mean, that's the trick, because being with our kids is a very worthwhile and fulfilling cause. And
just like most of the things we do are worthwhile.
Right. All this is good stuff. Right.
But we've got to schedule that time in, right, as a couple, whether it's a Friday night blocked off that is sacred, like, sorry, nothing comes in front of it, or going away at least quarterly, or whatever it is, we have got to block out that time. I know a couple who they take a half an hour every night, whether it's at midnight, 1 a.m, 10, whenever, as soon as the last child is in bed, they have a half an hour where they just sit together, they hold hands and talk, because that is a sacred time to them. And I think that is so cool.
Yeah.
I think that's just a wonderful example that they are prioritizing their marriage.
And Janie, sometimes you have to get creative, right? I remember for us, when we were in the thick of it with our 8 children, and just there wasn't a night between church and sports and other events, there wasn't a night. I mean, every Friday and Saturday, not Saturday night, but every Friday night seemed to be. We started doing lunch dates on Fridays. I remember that for quite a while, because that was the only time we could find.
Yeah. I actually like that. That was fun.
Maybe we need to bring that back.
We do. So another quote from your study from a woman that said, our children's time demands and commitments is the single reason we don't spend enough time together as a couple. This causes trouble in our marriage because we don't spend adequate time together. We probably tend to let our children be too involved. We've talked about limiting their activities, but we always come back to the fact that we want them to develop their talents and do the things that they want to do. And because of my work and church schedule and our children's activities, there is never time for myself or my spouse. We both face the same challenges, so finding time for each other is difficult. Even if we wanted to have a special night or date night every week, it's almost impossible because our children will have a game or an activity. And I think we can all relate to this, right? I don't think there's anyone that has multiple children that can't relate to this woman's feelings and her comments.
Yeah.
So we could talk about all day the reasons why that we are so busy and what comes, in front of our marriage.
And I think we're trying to connect this idea of hyper busyness with what leads to, in so many cases, taking each other for granted, and this entropy
and the apathy.
Yeah, and we're talking about is when we just become. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of people that are just sitting around as a married couple with the newspaper in their hand, sitting on the couch every night. They're just like, you know what? I just don't really like her that much anymore. I don't think that happens too often. What happens is we get distracted and pulled away from each other. Right. And Satan loves that. He's driving that bus, no question about it.
Yeah, like we always say, one of his greatest tools is distraction. And I think that's one of his greatest tools in marriage is putting so many distractions in our way that we don't take time for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the first things that we're going to talk about, ways to kind of combat this, is let's acknowledge it in our marriage. You know, if we have this problem, and I know we do, as we've been preparing this, we're like, whoa, we are way too busy.
Yeah, we need to go get some help.
Too many things get it, and we don't even have 8 kids at home anymore, right? But we are still way too busy, and we are still letting way too many things get in between our marriage.
Jenny, can I stop you right there just for a second? Because I want you to finish this thought, but I'm just going to say it right now. We have a lot of friends now that are retiring and that are retired, and I talk to them all the time because I'm, jealous in some ways, because in my mind I'm thinking, oh my gosh, retirement, you get to just chill now. We're going to relax and sit in the hammock and drink drinks and read, and every one of them is saying, that I'm talking to, is saying, actually, we're busier now than we've ever been. In fact, I don't even know how we did what we did with that job that I had, because we have no time for anything. And my point in interrupting you, and I'm really sorry about that, but my point in saying that is, if any of us think that automatically at some point in our lives we're just going to have this time all of a sudden, we are so wrong. We have to make the time. We've got to create this space.
And manage our time.
And be intentional about it, right?
That's true. So what I was going to say is that, so we as a couple need to acknowledge that, yes, we are letting things get in the middle of our marriage. If we're feeling like our marriage is stale or kind of getting apathetic, or we aren't connecting, or we don't have the closeness, and let's acknowledge it and start working on it. Because we're never going to change anything that we don't acknowledge. And so I think that's step number 1, right? Is we got a problem.
And
Houston, there is a problem.
Yeah, Houston, we have a problem. Well, no, when you said that, it just reminded me of another couple I saw years ago that actually divorced after like 40 years of marriage. And when I asked her why, she goes, you know what? He just became so boring. Our life was just so boring, she said. And I just thought, that feels like that could have been avoided if you would have maybe talked about it a little bit before then, instead of just after 40 years going, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get out of this. But to your point, Janie, I think is let's acknowledge it and start doing something about it, and recognizing if we stay on the track we're on, we're going to be like that couple after 40 years that says, okay, this is just boring. Let's just be done.
I remember years ago when we were first married, we moved to Arizona with 2 little babies. And right outside of our door, our first little apartment complex, there was a tennis court.
Yeah.
And my dad was there helping us unpack and unload the truck. And he said, hey, you and Janie need to take up tennis. Do you remember this conversation?
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh, okay, great. Yeah. And he's like, no, seriously, you guys need to take up tennis. And you're like, okay, and he just kept persisting. And you were like, okay, why? And he's like, hey, the day's going to come when all of your kids have left the house and are gone, and you two need a hobby. You need something you can do together to still have fun, to still enjoy each other, and have something in common. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we were 22 years old at the time with 2 babies, but he was already warning us and teaching us that you've got to have that connection.
Yeah. It
didn't end up being tennis, but I think we've got some other things, right, that we do.
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to be painting walls on houses or whatever, but. And so Janie, I love your idea of, okay, number 1, we've got to recognize this. Here's another thought, and it's so simple. Every couple can do this. It's praying together. Let's make time to pray together as a couple. Like I said, talk about a non-threatening, something that we could probably fit in our schedule rather easily. But listen to what President Gordon B. Hinckley said years ago. He said, I know of no single practice that will have a more salutary effect upon the lives of a couple that kneel together as you begin each day and as you close each day. He says, somehow the little storms that seem to afflict every marriage are dissipated when kneeling before the Lord you thank him for one another, in the presence of one another, and then together invoke the blessings upon your lives, your home, your loved ones, and your dreams. He said, then God will be your partner, and your daily conversations with him will bring peace into your hearts and a joy into your lives that can come from no other source. Your companionship will sweeten through the years, and your love will strengthen, and your appreciation for each other will grow. Now, I have the kind of faith that when someone like Gordon B. Hinckley says something like that, I totally believe it, and will take President Hinckley up on that promise, because it will happen. It's true.
I love that. The next one is, let's continue our courtship. Let's do the things that we did at the beginning to make us fall in love with each other. Let's bring those back. Let's bring date night back. Let's bring the fun and excitement and the flowers and the romance. Let's bring it back. And I love this quote by Joe J. Christensen that he said, keep your courtship alive. Make time to do things together, just the two of you. As important as it is to be with the children as a family, you also need regular weekly time alone together. Scheduling it will let your children know that you feel that your marriage is so important that you need to nurture it. That takes commitment, planning, and scheduling. And I do love that. I do love that the kids would know that, oh, no, sorry, that's mom and dad's date night, or that's their time together. And I think that makes a healthy family. The family is based on the marriage, on the parents. And when that fails, the whole family's going to fall apart. So I think that would do a lot for children to know that their parents do love each other. They like being together, and they have a special time set aside that's just for them. And the kids need to know that.
And I think you could say that these dates don't have to be costly, but also let's be creative, because another pattern I think that I notice is that once couples get, we can become apathetic in our dating life together. And what I mean by that is, okay, so where do you want to go eat tonight? And you go eat somewhere, and that's kind of what you do. But remember, before you were married, you were doing all kinds of fun activities, that really bonded you together. And so why not be creative in that? Couples go to movies together. Well, you can't talk and connect while you're watching a movie. I mean, there's got to be other ways to do that, but we ought to elevate our game when it comes to dating. So Janie, along these lines of continuing courtship, I love this quote by Bill Doherty, back to a book that he wrote years ago called Putting Family First. He said, I don't hold out my own marriage as a model for all couples, and I don't mean to imply that we had no struggles with our children or made no mistakes. We had our share of both. But I know we did one thing well. We taught our children that we valued our marriage without devaluing them, that more for us meant more for them, that we were mates before we were parents, and that in the solar system of our family, our marriage was the sun and the children the planets, rather than the other way around. And you think that's so great? And you just think of that for a minute. I think there are a lot of families out there that their children are the sun.
Right. It gets very mixed up and backwards.
Right. And the marriage is out there somewhere in the solar system floating around. And then when he said this idea that we were able to teach our children that we valued our marriage without devaluing them, I think that's a great statement, because it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do that. You put God first, and everything always falls into its proper place. But put your spouse right up there, and it will. And then that's better. I love what he said also, that he says that more for us meant more for them. In other words, we're going to be better parents. We're going to be a better parent to you if we're madly in love with each other as a husband and wife, as your mom and dad. And that we can't wait to see each other, that we have a great close relationship. That means we're going to be pretty dang good parents too.
And that really takes me back to that story that Elder Holland told many years ago. Mm-hmm. He was the BYU president when we were here at BYU. So we just learned to love.
We have a special love
Jeffrey
for
R. Holland. But he shared the story of many years ago when they felt like this, when life was so stressful for them as a young couple. He was in graduate school at Yale. He was also serving in the state presidency at the time, directing the institute. They were married. They had a couple young babies. His wife, Patricia, was called to be the Relief Society president while they were there, being a wife and mother. And she was also watching other people's children to make ends meet. And it was just a really, really crazy time for them. But he said that no matter what, they decided that every Friday night was going to be a date night for them, no matter what was going to happen. In Elder Holland's words, he said, on that night for a few hours, we would be together. We would step off the merry-go-round. We would take a deep breath or two and remind ourselves how much we loved each other, why we were doing all of this in the first place, and that surely there must be a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. He said, I do not remember those dates ever amounting to much. I literally cannot remember ever going to dinner, but we must have. We certainly must have at least gotten a pizza on occasion. I just don't remember it. But what I do remember is walking in the Yale New Haven Arboretum, which was just across the street from our student housing. I remember long walks where we're holding hands and making dreams of what life might be when things were less demanding, which is ironic and so funny.
Did not quite happen, right, for them?
Down at the end of the street was a Dairy Queen where we would occasionally end up for a cone or on really good nights, a root beer float. Elder Holland further stated that both he and Patricia needed those nights just to give them a sense of sanity and direction. It was a time to reconnect and celebrate what mattered most was our marriage. Those Friday nights were something the Hollands both looked forward to, and the time they spent together was renewing and healing. Elder Holland concluded, a drugstore psychologist once said that people need 3 things to be emotionally healthy: someone to love, significant things to do, and something pleasant to look forward to. And then he challenged the men, brethren, please make sure your wife has something pleasant, something genuinely fun, and something to look forward to regularly. And I love that.
It's one of the great stories I think Elder Holland has shared. And it's something, like you said, Janie, I think all of us can relate to that. And so what we would say, in terms of LDS, let's do something, that we're inviting couples to have significant date nights, right? And by the way, men, if any men are listening, this is not your wife's job to plan every date night and to get all the babysitters and make all the arrangements. You take turns, right? Because we have 4 weeks of the month, and so one of you could take 1 week, the other take the other. And if some couples are in situations that we've been in before financially, maybe it's something you do once or twice a month, right? But it's regular is the key, and it's something that you both can look forward to. And it's not a time just to go eat and that's all you do and you just come back home, but go have some fun together and remember why you fell in love in the first place.
Well, and again, it doesn't even have to cost money. Like Elder Holland said, go take a walk. Go walk in the canyon. Go walk around a park. It doesn't have to
go to the park and sit on the swings. I know we've done that before.
Go share an ice cream cone.
Once again, there's the invitation for everyone I always say, hey, let's plan a wonderful, awesome date night, just like you would have done before you were married to each other. The kind where you have the food and the entertainment and all the arrangements made. And even, Janie, I've learned that you like this. It's when I call you and say, hey, honey, do you want to go on a date tonight? I think you like that a lot but more than if I say, where do you want to go eat, right? Yes. So we got to kind of make it a little bit romantic, right, as we do it. So that would be our invitation to all of you.
Yes, go on a date with your spouse this week.
All right, honey. I'm looking forward to this. I can't wait to see what you've planned. Have a great week, everyone.